Hi there, Pyrrho. This is the response to your video, why we have to support will. There's a few things about it. I mean, the overall claim that you're making there, I think, which is the rejection of will leads to a kind of pessimism and yeah, that whole terminal approach to life and apathetic relationships to things like political choices. To me, that sounds very much like that phrase, if there was no God, we'd have to invent him. You know what I mean? You make. I understand that you have a particular relationship to this idea of will, but what you seem to be arguing there is a kind of philosophy of the as if. That if there was no will, we'd have to invent it, because without it, well, how could we go on? Or we have to invent, or that excuse for religion, that it brings consolation. Even if there was no God, even if there was no afterlife, we'd have to invent it because it brings consolation. I don't think those are viable arguments, to be honest. But specifically, there's a couple of things I'm interested in what you were talking about. And one thing in particular, which is you mentioned the word urge. You were talking about your own experience of being propelled by will, and perhaps being over-propelled by it. And you said that you seem to be associating the use of the will with the feeling of an urge. And that's a really interesting connection there. Because certainly as I see it, or when I come to think about what you said, anything that's urging you, if you're urged to do something, if you're driven to do something, if you're motivated to do something, if you're charged or tasked to do something, then you're not exercising will. I mean, almost by definition, the will lies with the urger or the driver or the motivator or the charger or whatever. You're the subject, you're the object of that urge. You're being urged. You're not the urger. So I think being subject to urges is not the same thing as exercising will. There might be an argument, and I know Libet talks a bit about this, there might be an argument for will as the resistance of the urge, the free want, I think you jokingly referred to it as. It's not great in my opinion, because of course there's no guarantee there that what you're actually experiencing is simply a contradictory urge. You have an urge to do something, and then that's overtaken by an urge to not do something, which we experience as resistance. So, yeah, I think if you're bringing urges into the discussion, it goes somewhere very peculiar. In fact, the weird thing about that, I see, and I should just repeat at this point what I've been saying earlier on, that I think free will and determinism, those kind of concepts, are artifacts of a certain kind of way of thinking. But however, if you reject the kind of determinism of the urge, because obviously if you're urged to do something and you follow that urge, then you're not exercising free will, therefore it is kind of deterministic. If you reject the determinism of the urge, even if you consciously do that, the only place to go is the determinism of the random. You live your life by tossing coins, you live your life by throwing dice, you live your life according to processes in which there is no urge, when the entire feeling tone of your relationship to activities is mechanically removed and placed in the hands of some kind of arbitrary instrument of choice making, which is equally deterministic, but it's deterministic of the random rather than the determinism of the urge. I think. Yeah, that Nietzsche stuff. That's really interesting, that Nietzsche. But I think Nietzsche is doing in that by saying that weak can be either strong or weak rather than free and unfree. I mean, he's playing into that stuff I talked about in the previous video, where he's just using metaphors of will as if will is a kind of energy that lives inside us, like the libido energy or the vril energy or something like that. It's nice poetry, but it's not explanatory. You can use it for kind of as if there wasn't any will, we'd have to invent the vril energy kind of talk. But I'm not convinced it takes you anywhere really, other than in the land of interesting poetry.